All right, guys, this week we are creating a timeline of the 21st century. I don't have my fancy document camera to do it with you. However, I'm going to create one using this desk and my iPad to help you and walk you through creating this timeline. You will need I can't find my paper. You'll need some paper and possibly a pen, a pencil, a marker, whatever you have to write with. It doesn't matter. I use a marker and a pen, but it's up to you what you want to use. So grab a piece of paper and join me as we create a timeline of the 20th century. Okay, so we are making a timeline, and typically in class I would give you a paper that would already have the timeline on it, but obviously we are not in class right now, so we're going to make our own. So I'm going to use a marker. You can use a pen, a pencil, a color pencil, whatever you have around. Okay, I'm just going to use a marker and then I'm going to write with a pen. So to start a timeline, we need our line. Okay, so I'm going to draw just a straight line across my paper. And if you're like me, you want to know how many events are going on a timeline. So there are 9 events that we're putting on here. So you'll need to draw 9 lines. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and draw my 9 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, there are my 9 lines. I'm going to switch over to a pen now. You can use the same marker, same color pencil, same pen, same pencil, whatever you were using. But we are talking about the 20th century. So I probably should have done this with my marker, but that's okay. So this is a 20th century timeline. Okay, that's what we are talking about, the 20th century. And when we're talking about centuries, the 20th century is actually the 19th, so it's 1900 to 1999. That is the 20th century. Okay, centuries go backwards. So if it's the 20th century, it's actually the 1900s. So like right now, we are in the 21st century, but it's the 2000s. Okay, it's seems a little weird, but the 20th century was the 1900s. So that's what we're going to talk about right now. We're going to put 9 events on a timeline for the 1900s. Okay, so the first event that we're going to put is 1914. Okay, so in 1914, this is when World War I begins. Okay, so World War I started in 1914. Okay, we haven't talked about it, but the World Wars was a big war against different countries all around the world. Okay, that's why it's called the World War. World War I started in 1914. But in 1917 is when the U.S. enters the war. Okay, so the United States didn't enter World War I until 3 years after it had started. Okay, and then in 1918, which is our next date, this is when World War I, you can just write it like that, WWI, it's just the Roman numeral 1. World War I ends. Okay, so in 1918, World War I ends. Okay, this timeline, I'm telling you, I was going so quickly. Our next date, which we kind of read about last week, if you did last week's assignment, I'm gonna just draw an arrow down here because I'm gonna run out of space. Okay, so this was when the 19th Amendment happened. So the 19th Amendment. And if you remember from last week, this means that all women have the right to vote. Okay, so when all my girls in the class, when you are 18, you will get to go vote for president. So I'm over 18, so I'll get to vote for the president in November this year because 2020 is a voting year. But girls, when you turn 18, you will get to vote for president. You'll get to vote for local officials. You'll get to vote. You have the right to vote based on the 19th Amendment. I don't know why I always remember the 19th Amendment was in 1920, but I remember it kind of like the century thing, how the 20th century is actually the 1900s. I remember the 19th Amendment happened in 1920 because of the same thing of the 20th century. That made sense in my head, but as I said it out loud, did not make sense. The next date is 1921, and remember, we are in Texas history, so we do need to know a few things about Texas. But in 1921, a woman named Miriam Ferguson, but people called her Ma, so Miriam Ma Ferguson, was elected the first female governor of Texas. Texas. I apologize if you can hear my noisy neighbors. They are being so loud. So sorry if you just heard that loud. I don't even know what that was. They were just being really loud. Sorry. But Miriam Ma Ferguson, she was elected the first female governor of Texas. So like right now, Greg Abbott is the governor of Texas. He's obviously a male, but Ma Ferguson was the first female governor of Texas. The next date is 1929. And in 1929, if you read about it last week, this is when the stock market crashed. So the stock market crashes. And this leads to the Great Depression. Okay, so the Great Depression starts in 1929. The stock market crashed. A lot of people lost money, and it created this thing called the Great Depression. And this is kind of when farmers started over-cultivating land. We were desperate for money because of the Great Depression, and so that's when the Dust Bowl started happening. The Dust Bowl was in the 1930s. We're kind of going back in time a little bit on this timeline, but no worries, it all flows together. But the stock market crashes. We have the Great Depression, okay, then we kind of have the Dust Bowl. We're not writing the Dust Bowl on here, but this is kind of when the Dust Bowl was happening in the 1930s. The next date is 1933, and I'm writing way too big, so it's starting to all flow together. But this is when the 21st Amendment, the 21st Amendment is created, and it cancels prohibition. Okay, remember the 18th Amendment. The 18th Amendment made alcohol to sell, the manufacturing of, the drinking alcohol. It made alcohol illegal. But in 1933, the 21st Amendment canceled prohibition. So basically, the 21st Amendment just canceled the 18th Amendment. So yes, the 18th Amendment still exists, but the 21st Amendment basically just cancels the 18th Amendment. So the 18th Amendment is still the 18th Amendment, but it's not really in play because of the 21st Amendment. So because we have the 21st Amendment, the 18th Amendment just it's not around. It's not an amendment that we follow because the 21st Amendment canceled the 18th Amendment. I'm gonna write on the top now because I ran out of room. But in 1941, this was World War II. Okay, remember my WW, that's World War, and then this is a Roman numeral 2. So World War II begins this is really what brings the United States. It does begin in 1941, but in 1941, Pearl Harbor brings the U.S. into World War II. Okay, so we have World War II beginning in 1941, but the United States doesn't enter until Pearl Harbor is attacked, and Pearl Harbor is in Hawaii. So when Pearl Harbor is attacked, then the United States will join World War II. The last thing is 1945, and again, we've got to talk about Texas because we are in Texas history. In 1945, Texas turns 100 years old. Okay, and this is based on when it became a state, because remember, Texas became a state in 1845, not 1836. 1836 was the Republic of Texas, but Texas officially became a state in 1845, making it 100 years old in 1945. Remember, this is due on Echo, yes, it's due. You can turn it in on Echo, but you can also take a picture of it and you can email it to me. If you made this on a Google Doc or slides or whatever, you need to share it with me. If it's not shared with me, I can't grade it. Okay, if it's not shared, you're gonna get a 0. Okay, it's got to be shared with me, otherwise I can't grade it, and a 0 is what you'll get. Okay, so either take a picture of it and turn it in on Echo, or turn it in on, just email it to me. Okay, my email, I'm gonna write it on here, is bailey.goodenough@comalisd.org. Okay, so you'll email it here or you'll turn it in on Echo. Okay, great job.